Hi everyone, so today we're going to be going through a 2020 Democratic primary prediction that does not include Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, as though they are the top two candidates right now. Obviously that could change, so we're going to take a more interesting approach on this. We're going to do a Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke matchup. So these four are pretty much the kind of the tier below Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. I would classify all of these people in the tier below, and within this, I would probably classify Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren a tier above Pete Buttigieg, who is a tier above Beto O'Rourke. So kind of Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and then Beto O'Rourke. But we're going to be going through a Democratic primary prediction, but we're going to make it a bit nicer, our map, just to, why not? Okay, we'll make it a side donut. There we go. What else can we do? That's charts, themes. I don't want that one. Maybe that looks quite nice. And then maps we've figured out, and that one. Okay. So Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Beto O'Rourke, all right now at 0 delegates. So what we're going to do, we're going to be going through this potential Democratic primary map. We're going to start off with the territories: American Samoa, Democrats abroad, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. Obviously, Democrats abroad is not a territory, it's all the people living outside of the US, so Canada, all of those other places. Then we'll go down to Alaska, Hawaii, then into California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, down the Red Wall, up the kind of Abe Lincoln area, and then we'll go Wisconsin, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, into the deep south, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, and Maine, and then we'll go down New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, and then all the way down to DC. So let's go through this potential map. Kamala Harris, sorry, just before we get started, this will be a hypothetical matchup, so it's based on what I would believe would happen in each of these things. So American Samoa, we don't have much data here. Hillary Clinton did win the primary, so I don't think that Elizabeth Warren would be able to pick that one up. I think that Kamala Harris could narrowly win there with about 33% of the vote, followed by someone like a Beto O'Rourke, also with 33% about of the vote. And then these two just share the rest of it, Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg. So Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke both win in the American Samoa. In Democrats abroad, Bernie Sanders won here in a landslide last time, so I'm going to give 61% to Elizabeth Warren, and I'm going to give 30% to Pete Buttigieg, and that, because it's less than 15%, both of these people don't get delegates. So that would mean that we need to, I would say Kamala Harris probably gets about 15% of the vote. She barely gets in. Beto O'Rourke not getting anything there. In the Guam, Hillary Clinton won here. I think Kamala Harris would be able to do well here, gaining about 50% of the vote. Elizabeth Warren, I think she might be able to barely scrape on with 16% of the vote. And then Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke also with 16% of the vote. So Kamala Harris the winner in Guam. Northern Mariana Islands. This one, Hillary Clinton did win it again, so again I'm going to give this one over to Kamala Harris. Pete Buttigieg also in the running, followed by Elizabeth Warren. In the Virgin Islands, again, Hillary Clinton territory here, so I will give it over to Kamala Harris, followed by Pete Buttigieg, followed by Beto O'Rourke. But there is, Bernie Sanders did get some votes here, so I am going to give one delegate over to Elizabeth Warren. In Puerto Rico, okay, so Puerto Rico, Hillary Clinton did win in Puerto Rico. But I think that Beto O'Rourke could do quite well. I'm going to give him about a third of the vote in the Puerto Rico, and I'm also going to give Kamala Harris about, there we go, 41%, and then Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. There is a base in Puerto Rico for Bernie Sanders, so I will give Elizabeth Warren 13 delegates in Puerto Rico. So where do we stand right now? Kamala Harris is at 34 delegates, Beto O'Rourke at 20, Elizabeth Warren at 25, Pete Buttigieg at 9. Now, in the state of Alaska, Bernie Sanders won here in a landslide. I believe Elizabeth Warren would be able to win here also in a landslide, followed by Kamala Harris, since she's also on the West Coast. I don't believe anyone else would crack 15%. State of Hawaii, this one was Bernie Sanders' territory. I'm going to give Elizabeth Warren the win in the state of Hawaii, followed by Beto O'Rourke, because I think he might be able to appeal to the Latino vote there. But I don't think, there we go, I don't think it'll be enough. I think he would barely crack 15% there at 18% of the vote, but then since there's not enough delegates to go around for everyone else, that is the thing for there. But since you can see here, since Kamala Harris doesn't crack 15%, she can't get any delegates. That's the rules in the Democratic primary. Now, okay, so I've just realized that I've been droning on way too long in these first states, so we're going to go through this quite quickly. Kamala Harris, this is her home state in the state of California, so I'm going to give her about 55% of the vote, followed by the Beto O'Rourke there in second place, followed by Elizabeth Warren, since there is quite a bit of a progressive base in the state of California. In Oregon, Bernie Sanders won here. I'm going to give that one over to Elizabeth Warren, followed by Kamala Harris. In the state of Washington, again, this is Bernie Sanders' territory. So the reason why on these western states I'm giving Kamala Harris second is because, you know, she's close to California. I believe she could do that. Nevada, the state of Nevada, this is an early primary state. Hillary Clinton narrowly won here. I believe Kamala Harris could do well, and Beto O'Rourke could do well in that. And there is a progressive base in the state of Nevada, so I will give 9 delegates over to Elizabeth Warren. So 328 for Kamala Harris, 234 for Elizabeth Warren, 146 for Beto O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg at 9. State of Arizona, the state of Arizona, I believe this one could go to Beto O'Rourke with about 55% of the vote, followed by Kamala Harris. There we go. Followed by Elizabeth Warren. In the state of Utah, the state of Utah, big progressive base here in the Democrats, 62% of the vote going over to Elizabeth Warren. I actually think that Pete Buttigieg could do quite well here, given that he is a proud Christian there, so I'm going to give him 20% of the vote there, and then the rest going off to Beto O'Rourke there in Utah. So, in the state of Idaho, again, this is Bernie Sanders' territory, so I'm going to give it 60-40 over to Elizabeth Warren, followed by Kamala Harris. There we go. Who's at 20, and then followed by Beto O'Rourke. No, I'm going to change that. I don't think Beto O'Rourke could crack that threshold, so I'm going to give 65-35 over to Elizabeth Warren. In the state of Montana, this is again Bernie Sanders' territory, so I'm going to give it over to Elizabeth Warren, followed by Pete Buttigieg, who I actually think could do quite well there, and he would barely crack 15%, followed by Kamala Harris. In the state of Wyoming, again, Bernie Sanders' territory, Elizabeth Warren would win here, followed by Pete Buttigieg, who I actually think could do relatively well for himself, followed by Kamala Harris. Now, down the Red Wall, Bernie Sanders did quite well in the Red Wall in 2016, with the exception of the state of Texas and South Dakota. But again, North Dakota goes to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders won here overwhelmingly in 2016, so it would go to Elizabeth Warren. I actually think that with the vote splitting, no other candidate would reach 15%. And so that, even though it looks weird, Elizabeth Warren doesn't win 100% of the vote. It's just the format of this website. But I believe all of these, O'Rourke, Buttigieg, and Harris, would all get between 5 to 14% of the vote, but none would crack 15%. So they can't split the delegates away from Elizabeth Warren. So all the delegates in North Dakota would actually go to Elizabeth Warren, which is pretty amazing, amazingly weird there. So in the state of South Dakota, this one was very close in 2016. I'm going to give the slight edge over to Elizabeth Warren, but I think the difference would not be enough for Elizabeth Warren to gain a net delegate, so it's 50-50 there in South Dakota. In Nebraska, Elizabeth Warren wins here big, followed by Beto O'Rourke. I think Beto O'Rourke could do well in Nebraska, but again, I think that I think that Pete Buttigieg could actually do well here since he's from Indiana. I think he would be able to crack 15% of the vote. Kamala Harris is not able to do that. In the state of Kansas, this is Bernie Sanders territory. I could see Beto O'Rourke coming in a very solid second place in Kansas. Oklahoma, I think, could get really interesting, but just because Bernie won here so overwhelmingly in 2016, I'm going to give the slight edge over to Elizabeth Warren, followed by Beto O'Rourke, because, you know, Texas is very close. Now, Beto O'Rourke now finally gets a win. He would win his home state of Texas. Elizabeth Warren, there is a progressive base in the state of Texas, so I think Elizabeth Warren could win there in second, followed by Pete Buttigieg. In the state of Louisiana, I could see most of these deep southern states going over to Kamala Harris. Hillary Clinton did quite well here. There is a very, very small base there, progressive base, I would say about 30% of the vote there in Louisiana, but Elizabeth Warren at 20% there. And then followed by Beto O'Rourke, very close to his home state there. In Arkansas, we're going to run through the rest of this map. In Arkansas, 18, there we go. And then we need to give some of these over to Elizabeth Warren. And then no other candidate reaches 15%, so the rest of the delegates are split between the remaining candidates. In the state of Missouri, I could see, this one was very close in 2016. I actually think that Elizabeth Warren could narrowly pick this up, but between the vote splitting of the conservative candidates, well, not conservative candidates, the less progressive candidates. Kamala Harris coming in a strong second place there. And then Beto O'Rourke and Pete Buttigieg. I think Pete Buttigieg could win in Missouri given its proximity to Indiana and how it's in the heartland. This is Iowa. Okay, so Iowa, I could see this one narrowly moving into the Elizabeth Warren column. I think Kamala Harris could come in a strong second place. I don't think Beto O'Rourke would do well in Iowa, followed by Pete Buttigieg there in Iowa. So finally, oh, no, I meant to put Kamala over Buttigieg. There we go. So Elizabeth Warren with 17 delegates, Kamala with 14, Pete Buttigieg at 10. Let's pause and take a look at where we are right now. Right now, Elizabeth Warren's in the lead with 517 delegates. Kamala Harris is with 444. Beto O'Rourke is 358. And Pete Buttigieg is right now at 84. Well behind the rest of the game. In the state of Minnesota, I could see Elizabeth Warren overwhelmingly taking this one, followed by Pete Buttigieg, just because, again, there's a very strong progressive base in the state of Minnesota. As for the state of Wisconsin, I could see Elizabeth Warren narrowly taking that one. Well, not narrowly, by quite a large margin. And in these Rust Belt states, I generally see Elizabeth Warren winning, but I could see Pete Buttigieg coming in a very close second. In Illinois, that's very close to Indiana. Hillary Clinton narrowly won the state, so I will narrowly give it over to Mayor Pete. Followed very closely by Elizabeth Warren, followed by, no other candidate reaches 15%, so the remaining delegates are split evenly between the remaining candidates. So, Pete Buttigieg gets the state of Illinois. Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, overwhelmingly popular. Pete Buttigieg wins in Indiana. Overwhelming favorite there. Bernie Sanders did win the 2016 Indiana primary, so I think Elizabeth Warren could pick that one up. Michigan, the state of Michigan. I do see Elizabeth Warren narrowly taking this, followed very closely by Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Very, very close behind there. I'd even put it a bit like that. Followed by Kamala Harris. I think she could narrowly get on the board in Michigan. In Ohio, very close to Indiana, I do see Pete Buttigieg doing quite well for himself there. But again, Kamala Harris, I think, could also be in the running here, and then also Elizabeth Warren. So this is really close three-way race in Ohio. In the state of Kentucky, Hillary Clinton narrowly won in the state of Kentucky, but only very narrowly, so I will give the slight edge over to Elizabeth Warren, followed very closely by Pete Buttigieg. If we can get it down, 9 to 19% of the vote out of Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke. I do see Kamala Harris narrowly taking it. I think the Clinton base would go for Kamala Harris. So where are we right now? 819 for Warren, 510 for Harris, 400 for Buttigieg, and 358 for Beto O'Rourke. So in the state of Tennessee, this one goes to Kamala Harris. There is a progressive base, very small one in Tennessee, so I will give 15 delegates over to Elizabeth Warren, followed by Beto O'Rourke. In Mississippi, this one also Kamala Harris territory. Elizabeth Warren only barely getting on the board, followed by Beto O'Rourke. Alabama, this one I think Kamala Harris could win very, very convincingly, followed by, I don't think Pete Buttigieg would be able to appeal to the African American base, neither can Beto O'Rourke, so it's going to be a two-way race there between Kamala and Warren, in which case I think that Kamala could overwhelmingly win in the state of Alabama. Okay, so we need to run through the rest of this map. Florida, Kamala Harris wins in the state of Florida. Beto O'Rourke getting on the board there in that state. If we can bet, he barely gets on the board there. Elizabeth Warren coming in second place there in Florida. Georgia, this is again Kamala Harris territory. It's going to be a two-way race between Kamala and Elizabeth Warren there in Georgia. South Carolina, this is big for Kamala Harris, followed by Elizabeth Warren. Okay, so 966 for Warren, 826 for Harris, Pete Buttigieg at 400, Beto O'Rourke at 425. North Carolina, this is Kamala Harris territory. Kamala Harris wins in North Carolina, followed by Elizabeth Warren. But I think Beto O'Rourke could narrowly get on the board there in North Carolina. Okay, Virginia. Here we go, Virginia. This one is an establishment Democratic state, so I think Kamala Harris could do well there, but I also think that people like Pete Buttigieg could do quite well there, followed by Elizabeth Warren. Beto O'Rourke not getting on the board there in Virginia. In West Virginia, Bernie Sanders did very well here. I think Elizabeth Warren could do well in West Virginia. I also think Beto O'Rourke could do relatively well there. 16% of the vote, with Kamala Harris also getting 16, but then Pete Buttigieg would also be in the running, so it's going to be very close, but I think that it could play out something like this, with Elizabeth Warren at 16, Kamala at 4, Pete Buttigieg at 4 in West Virginia. Oh, we've got to go over Colorado and New Mexico. Colorado, that one would definitely go to someone like a Beto O'Rourke and a Kamala Harris. Both of those figures well known there in the state of Colorado. Elizabeth Warren barely getting on the board in Colorado. In New Mexico, this one is, I think, could also be Beto O'Rourke territory, with Kamala Harris coming in second place there, followed by Elizabeth Warren. Okay, so we're going to go Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and then Massachusetts down to the end. Okay, Pennsylvania, here we go. Pennsylvania, this one I think could narrowly go over to Elizabeth Warren, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg, followed by Kamala Harris. New York, this is a very big prize. I think that Elizabeth Warren, with her home state being Massachusetts, she could edge this one out at about 47.77% of the vote. Pete Buttigieg, I think he might be able to do well in the upper part of New York. I don't think he would be able to win downtown, and so I will give Kamala Harris an edge there, followed by Pete Buttigieg. Beto O'Rourke not on the board in New York. in Maine, so we're gonna go Maine and then all the way down these ones. Okay, so Maine. Bernie Sanders won here, so Elizabeth Warren, big Warren territory. Pete Buttigieg getting on second place. There we go. Followed by Kamala Harris. Okay, the Northeast. Here's the thing with the Northeast. Sorry, I think I'm gonna sneeze soon. Anyway, the Northeast. So, New Hampshire. This is an early primary state. I think Elizabeth Warren could win here in the state of New Hampshire, followed by someone like a Kamala Harris, followed by someone like a Pete Buttigieg. Vermont, in the state of Vermont. I mean, with Bernie Sanders backing, Elizabeth Warren would undoubtedly be the favorite to win in Vermont, followed narrowly by Pete Buttigieg. I think Pete Buttigieg could win in the Northeast, but not before losing to Elizabeth Warren. In the state of Massachusetts, I see Elizabeth Warren winning here. Elizabeth Warren wins 57% of the vote in her home state, followed by Kamala Harris at 30% of the vote, followed by Pete Buttigieg, who gets 16% of that Massachusetts vote. State of Rhode Island, Elizabeth Warren, again, Bernie Sanders did win here, so I will give that edge over to Elizabeth Warren. Sorry, Rhode Island, those delegates actually would move over into the Pete Buttigieg column, like, that could play out something like that. In the state of Connecticut, this one, Hillary Clinton, I think, was narrowly able to win it out, but I think Elizabeth Warren would be able to win it here, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg, because I think the Clinton vote in these northeastern states would transfer over to someone like a Buttigieg. In New Jersey, this is overwhelmingly Clinton. I think that Pete Buttigieg would be able to win here, followed by Kamala Harris, but I think Elizabeth Warren would be able to get on the board with 15% of the vote. Delaware, again, Kamala Harris territory, so I will give the edge over to her there, but I'm going to do that, and then Elizabeth Warren with 3 delegates there. Maryland, 2 more states, people, 2 more states. Maryland, Kamala Harris, again, winning in Maryland, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg, which is followed by Elizabeth Warren. DC, this is establishment Democratic state. I'm going to give Kamala Harris the overwhelming edge here, followed by Mayor Pete Buttigieg. There we go. But hang on, let me just fix this up. There we go. Elizabeth Warren not getting on the board in DC. Now, before we get into the superdelegates, right now Elizabeth Warren is leading 1398, followed by Kamala Harris, who's at 1194, followed by Pete Buttigieg, who's at 683, followed by Beto O'Rourke, who's at 493. I believe that in this case, Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke would both throw their support behind Kamala Harris at the convention. And in this case, I believe that the superdelegates would go something like 65, about 65, 35, because the other campaigns would have told the superdelegates, their superdelegates that they had in the bag, go to Kamala Harris, because that's who I believe they would throw their support behind. And so what that would mean is that even though it's 1693 to 1663, both very close, since of these other 2 campaigns are moving their support behind Harris, I believe that in this case, between Harris, Warren, Buttigieg, and O'Rourke, Kamala Harris could be the Democratic nominee for president. Thank you.